Tonight, we dive into a story buried beneath fear, manipulation, and a mother's twisted hunger for power. A story the Benson family never wanted the world to hear, because behind their white picket fence, behind the choir robes and Bible verses, lived a woman who believed she was chosen not by God, but by destiny. And the only person standing between her and total control was her youngest daughter, Eli, the girl nobody thought mattered. Two outsiders. Margaret Benson was a pillar of faith, a church elder, a counselor, a mother of three. But inside her home, she ruled like a queen defending a crown only she could see. She gathered neighbors and church members in her living room, people who called her Mama Margaret and told them God spoke through her alone. They believed her, they feared her, and she fed off that devotion. Ileana sat quietly in the background, watching. Margaret always said she was born weak, born spiritually inferior. It was a message repeated until it sank into Eliana's bones. But trauma does something strange either. It crushes you, or it wakes a fire inside you. And for Eliana, that fire began with a simple act, writing. In a hidden notebook, she recorded everything: her mother's punishments, her fabricated prophecies, her manipulation. She hid the notebook under a loose floorboard, knowing that if Margaret ever found it, the consequences would be devastating. Margaret's rules were absolute. If a chore was forgotten, she claimed demons were responsible. If anyone disagreed with her, she said they were possessed. Questioning her authority, that was the ultimate sin. One morning, when Eliana forgot to bless the water before boiling it, Margaret slammed dishes and accused her of inviting curses into the home. She grabbed her daughter's chin and forced her to hold eye contact as she said, "You were born weak. Your purpose is obedience." That was the moment something inside Ileana finally cracked. Margaret's influence on her followers grew darker. She held late-night meetings in the basement, telling them to cut ties with family members who doubted her. She confiscated their money for the work of the ministry. She banned medical treatment for sickness, insisting prayer alone was enough. And she delivered long, detailed prophecies Ileana later discovered were plagiarized from old religious texts. Margaret hid behind her washing machine. It was the kind of dramatic irony you only see in stories. A woman claiming divine revelation while secretly copying every word. One day at school, a counselor noticed changes in Eliana, dark circles under her eyes, flinching when touched, slipping grades. When asked if everything was okay at home, Eliana hesitated, then whispered the first truth she had ever spoken aloud. It wasn't everything, but it was enough for someone to finally watch more closely. But then disaster struck. Margaret found the hidden notebook. She stormed into Eliana's room, trembling with rage, accusing her of betrayal, of creating lies meant to destroy God's chosen vessel. She tore out pages and shoved Eliana to the floor. From that night on, Eliana knew she had one chance, left to gather evidence strong, enough to bring her mother's empire down before Margaret silenced her for good. Late at night, Eliana crept into the basement and recorded Margaret instructing her followers to abandon their families and swear absolute loyalty. It was dangerous. Margaret had eyes everywhere, but the recording was real. It was undeniable. On a Sunday morning, while Margaret delivered a fiery sermon, Eliana slipped the audio file to Pastor Jordan, a respected voice in the community. When he heard it, the color drained from his face. For years, Margaret controlled the narrative, but that day, Eliana controlled the truth. Pastor Jordan halted the service and demanded Margaret step down. Gasps filled the sanctuary. Margaret froze. For the first time in her life, she felt power slipping from her fingers, and she knew exactly who caused it. That night, silence filled the Benson home. Eliana crept down the hallway, sensing danger. A floorboard creaked, and Margaret appeared behind her, calm in a way that felt more terrifying than rage. "You betrayed me," she whispered. "You think people will believe your little stories. Sweet child, you have no idea who you're dealing with." She locked the doors. She unplugged the phones, and she whispered a chilling promise. "If I lose everything, I won't lose alone." But justice was already closing in. The next morning, police officers arrived. After the school counselor filed an emergency welfare report, officers took one look at Margaret's behavior. The frightened children, the locked rooms, the strange documents, and they arrested her for coercion. unlawful confinement, and psychological abuse. For the first time in her life, Ileana exhaled. Justice had finally stood up for her. But this story wasn't over. At the police station, Margaret sat across from detectives with a disturbing calm. She smiled and said, "You think you've saved that girl? You don't understand. Everything that happened was part of the prophecy." Detectives exchanged uneasy glances. They thought the nightmare was ending. But Margaret Benson had followers, loyal ones willing to do anything for her. In 48 hours after her arrest, one of those followers vanished. Car keys left on the counter. Front door wide open. A handwritten note on the table. Mother said the real mission begins now. And that means Ileana is not safe. Not yet. The police believed they had ended Margaret Benson's reign the moment the handcuffs clicked shut. But in cases like this, when a manipulator builds a world out of fear and obedience, the collapse never happens quietly. It unravels in waves. And the first wave came with that missing follower, the man who called Margaret his spiritual mother, the one neighbors said never spoke unless she allowed him to. His sudden disappearance sent a tremor of fear through the investigation. Detectives realized they were not dealing with a simple abuse case. They were dealing with a structuring, underground network of people conditioned to obey one woman, even from behind locked bars. Ileana was placed in protective custody while the investigation continued. She stayed in a small, quiet room in a temporary foster home, but sleep never came easily. Every creak of the house made her wonder if someone was outside. Every unfamiliar sound made her think of Margaret's last warning. "If I lose everything, I won't lose alone." She remembered those words too clearly. She heard them in the silence. Detectives kept questioning Margaret, but she responded with eerie calm, speaking in riddles. She said things like, "The seed has been planted, or my children know what to do." It was the type of language that made investigators uneasy because they couldn't tell whether she was bluffing or if her followers really were planning something. They began interviewing members of her inner circle, but none of them gave straight answers. Some cried, some defended her with religious zeal, some stared blankly, as if waiting for instructions Margaret could no longer give. It was clear her influence hadn't ended, was just dormant. Meanwhile, Ileana tried to adjust to a world that had finally given her freedom, but she didn't know how to live in it. Normal things: sunlight through a window, a quiet breakfast table, someone asking if she'd like more juice felt strange. She kept expecting every kindness to turn into a trap. She had spent years learning to make herself small enough to avoid punishment. Now people were asking her to take up space, to speak, to choose. But she didn't trust her own voice yet. Then, one afternoon, while investigators were reviewing evidence, something unsettling happened. A new anonymous message arrived at the station. No signature, no return address, just a small piece of paper with neat handwriting. It said, "Her mission is not complete." Detectives traced the ink and paper, typed but found nothing useful. The message could have come from anyone, or worse, someone close. When they asked Ileana if she recognized the handwriting, she froze. It looked almost identical to the writing Margaret forced her children to practice when copying scripture. Perfect curves, perfect spacing, perfect pressure. It meant the follower who disappeared wasn't the only one still acting. The investigation deepened. Authorities searched Margaret's house again, this time with more urgency. Hidden compartments were found in her bedroom. Walls, little drawers stuffed with lists of followers, schedules for prophetic meetings, and letters instructing certain members to prepare for separation from the world. In the basement, under a false panel, officers uncovered a locked notebook. Inside were names, coded messages, and a disturbing entry dated only a week before Margaret's arrest. A man sitting in the last row, someone investigators had not noticed before. He nodded once, barely perceptible, but she saw him. She expected him, and Ileana, sitting beside detectives, followed her mother's gaze. When she saw who Margaret was looking at, her heart dropped, because she recognized him. It was someone she thought had escaped years ago, someone she never expected to see again, someone who knew her family's darkest rituals better than anyone but Margaret herself. And he was smiling. The judge continued reading the charges, but Ileana wasn't listening anymore, because she suddenly realized something. Margaret hadn't lost her power. She had simply passed it on. The moment Eliana recognized Caleb Rohn sitting in the back of the courtroom, the world seemed to tilt. He had been the ghost of her childhood, the shadow watching from doorways, the quiet presence at her mother's meetings, the obedient follower Margaret molded long before she had children. Everyone thought he disappeared years ago, escaping Margaret's grip. But the truth was far more unsettling. Caleb hadn't escaped. He had been waiting, his eyes locked onto Eliana with a calm that felt colder than hatred. It was devotion, dangerous, unshakable devotion. Margaret's kind, the kind that made people surrender their lives, their identities, even their morality. Eliana's breath quickened, but she forced herself to stay still. For the first time, she understood that her mother's power hadn't vanished when she was arrested. It had simply retreated into the shadows where her most loyal followers remained. As the judge read the charges, Margaret didn't look at the prosecutor or the jury. She kept her gaze fixed on Caleb. A slow smile crept across her face, small, deliberate, confident. She wasn't smiling like someone facing years in prison. She was smiling like someone watching her plan unfold exactly as she imagined. Eliana felt a chill run through her. Margaret's power wasn't gone. It was moving. Court adjourned, and police rushed Eliana out. But her mind stayed locked on Margaret's expression. Something about that silent exchange with Caleb felt intentional, coded, rehearsed. The detectives saw her fear and immediately dug deeper into Caleb's history. They found almost nothing: no address, no financial trail, no digital footprint. He lived like a ghost, shaped by Margaret's commands, and that made him twice as dangerous. Authorities moved Eliana to a heavily guarded safe. Cameras monitored every entrance. Officers rotated in shifts. Still, she lay awake, listening to every small sound, remembering her mother's final warning. If I lose everything, I won't lose alone. For years, Eliana thought those words meant violence. But now she understood they meant control. Margaret didn't need to lift a finger if someone else believed they were acting for her. A few days later, a letter arrived at the prosecutor's office. No fingerprints, no return address, just a message written in blocky, uneven handwriting. The mother said the daughter must return what she stole. Correction will be done. Eliana recognized the handwriting instantly. Caleb had always written that way, letters shaped like a child learning to write, shaky and heavy. She told detectives, and within hours, security doubled again. But the real turning point came a week into the trial. One morning, Eliana arrived in court, surrounded by officers. Margaret sat at the defense table, hands folded neatly, her expression calm as the prosecution questioned a former follower who shakily described years of coercion. Margaret slowly turned toward Eliana and held her gaze. It wasn't anger, it was certainty, and that certainty terrified Eliana more than any threat could. Just before recess, the emergency phone carried by Eliana's escort rang. Only security teams used that line. When the officer answered, his face paled. He handed the phone to the lead detective, who listened for only a few seconds before his shoulders tensed. A voice whispered through the receiver, low and gravelly, "The mother's work is almost finished." The call ended. The detective immediately signaled for evacuation. But before they could move Eliana, another officer ran in from the hallway with urgency written across his face. He whispered something to the detective, who froze. Eliana watched his expression crumble into dread. He turned to her. "Eliana, something happened at the safe house." Eliana's heart pounded. "What?" He swallowed. "We found a symbol drawn on the wall. One your mother used in her rituals. Whoever drew it got inside. They were there, but they didn't take anything. They didn't touch anything. They just left a symbol." Eliana felt the world closing around her. Margaret's influence was alive, active, moving. But then something unexpected happened. Margaret stood up. Her lawyer tried to stop her, but she brushed him off and requested to speak to the judge privately. The courtroom went silent. After a long debate, the judge allowed it with officers present. The chamber's door closed behind them, leaving everyone waiting in tense silence. Minutes passed, 10, 15. Then the door opened, and for the first time, Margaret Benson wasn't calm. She looked furious. She pointed at Caleb, her voice sharp and trembling with a rage Eliana had never seen her show in public. "I told you to prepare the way, not destroy it," she screamed. "You ruined everything. You disobeyed my anointing. Caleb rose from his seat, stunned. His devotion, his faith, cracked in a single moment. "Mother, I did what you asked." Margaret shook her head violently. "No. You acted for yourself, not for me." The spell broke. Detectives rushed him. Caleb didn't resist. He stared at Margaret with the hollow eyes of someone who had just realized the person he worshipped never cared for him at all. Margaret's outburst became the key that shattered her defense. It proved what prosecutors had struggled to establish, that she commanded her followers, even from jail, that her influence continued through covert instructions, and that she had absolute authority over them. Everything she denied, everything she manipulated, everything she tried to hide, she exposed herself in a single moment of rage. The verdict followed swiftly. Guilty. On all counts, Margaret Benson was sentenced to decades in prison with no chance of early release. Caleb faced his own charges and entered a psychiatric facility after breaking down during questioning, insisting the prophecies had been lies. And for the first time, Ileana walked out of the courthouse not as someone being protected, but as someone finally free. Free from Margaret's rules, free from the fear that shaped her childhood, free from the belief that she was born weak. In the months that followed, she moved into a stable foster home, continued therapy, and began writing again, not in a hidden notebook, but in one she kept openly on her desk. Each page was a step forward, a reclaiming of the voice Margaret tried to crush. Ileana learned a truth that stayed with her for the rest of her life. Real power isn't the ability to control others. It's the courage to break free when no one believes you can. And for the first time, the Benson house, the place that once felt like a cage, stood empty, quiet and powerless. The story finally ended, but Ileana's life was just beginning.